Hello, everyone. It is your girl, Athena Alea, and I am back with another podcast on magical formula. So, I did promise you the last time that I would do a podcast on infinity, which I think is an incredibly critical topic to understand as it relates to magical formula, because the truth is, if we are engaging in a practice, such as a magical practice or a mystical practice, in which we desire to create a transformation within ourselves or to manifest something into the 3D. If we cannot cognitively restructure ourselves so that our consciousness grasps and understands through the intellectual capacity of our frontal lobe that everything is infinite, then we may as well just be waving wands around. Truly, you're just playing a game if you can't bridge that gap between what you're doing in the physical realm and recognizing that fundamentally speaking, everything is infinite, and that is where you are drawing the power and energy from. So, excuse me, pardon me. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to address the topic with respect to a commonly utilized and I think fairly well-known ritual known as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which is widely used in certain traditions such as the Golden Dawn, the Lemma, and others. The reason that I'm doing this is because the Golden Dawn system and its derivatives, in my opinion, is an excellent way in which to address magical formula because it's very elegant in the way that it was devised, as it takes magical formula from a number of ancient practices and essentially coalesces it into one elegant system. And so, by understanding how the Golden Dawn system has utilized magical formula, if you practice other systems, other ancient systems, then you can understand your system better. And also, recognizing that the Golden Dawn system was so powerful and that the magic that it utilizes is so effective, many other modern magical systems have utilized and leveraged ritual practices such as the LBRP and its underlying formula with respect to theirs. So if you're a magical practitioner, for example, you probably always open up a circle of protection before you begin anything additional, right? This is pretty fundamental in terms of performing any kind of magical work. It's derived from the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which takes its formula from other ancient traditions, right? But again, the Golden Dawn system is, in my opinion, very similar to ballet in terms of, if you want to be a serious dancer, everybody takes ballet because it's the most technical form of dance that exists. And anybody who's studied magical tradition will pretty much confirm with you that the Golden Dawn tradition is the most highly technical system of magic that exists. And that's why it's so beneficial to understand it and to recognize how it utilizes formula. So, segueing on over now to the topic of the day, which is infinity. The LBRP, a lot of people look at it as a ritual that essentially either banishes energy so that you can have a pure circle by which to work in. Some consider this not necessarily to be a banishing of energies, but more a neutralizing state of affairs, right? And then also it includes things like the invocation of the four elements with respect to the archangels and some other facets which you can read about in a number of books. However, what's I would say rarely, if ever, recognized is what's most critical about the LBRP, which is the application of magical formula to restructure a person's consciousness to recognize its infinite state of potential. And I'm going to walk you through each of the elements of the LBRP to show you how this is demonstrated. So then we'll circle back around and we'll talk about the more common facets of it and how those two things relate, how the idea of restructuring your consciousness utilizing the formula of the LBRP actually results in a neutral space within your magical circle, and therefore prepares you to be able to perform additional work. So we're going to start at the very beginning. And one thing I want to say is when it comes to high magic and highly technical magic, there isn't anything about it that's off the cuff, right? There are facets of magic that apply what I call the royal art, that allow for space for a person to, engage and modify things for certain reasons. I'll probably do a podcast on that topic specifically at another point. But fundamentally speaking, there is nothing that is performed related to a magical formula that doesn't have a reason, even if you just think it is something very innocuous. And I will demonstrate that now. So I won't, and I also just want to clarify real quick before I start that the vows that I have promised to uphold in my magical order do not keep me from talking about magic philosophically, academically, or even with respect to the formula. I just cannot teach someone how to perform the particular magical technique. So I will not be teaching the LBRP today. I just will go over the fundamental aspects of the formula. Okay, so the very first thing that we do when we're preparing to perform this ritual is, generally speaking, we close our eyes. This is something that a lot of people would think, well, yeah, of course, just close my eyes. I'm just going to center myself, right? The purpose of closing your eyes is just go internal and center yourself so that you can prepare for the ritual. However, the act of closing your eyes is the first fundamental and critical aspect of applying the formula. Something that personally I've never heard before until I began really studying the Greek mystery traditions in depth is that the first initiation is veiling the eyes. And if you are a ceremonial magician or you have been initiated into a mystical or magical group, one of the common facets of that initiation is to cover or blindfold the eyes. Now, people normally think that this is just the candidate waiting outside the circle, being prepared. It's meant to protect them and the people inside from knowing what's going on. Sure, and absolutely, those definitely are very relevant. But what a lot of people don't recognize is the first initiation, the first act of initiation is covering and closing the eyes to the material world, right? This is really, really important when it comes to recognizing and understanding the concept of infinity within, because when we're being stimulated by the binary realm that exists without us, we can't explore effectively the concept of infinity until it becomes matured within our sphere of sensation. And what I mean by that is if we consider something like the practice of meditation, the purpose of meditation is to allow the analytical mind to transcend so that a person ends up in a state of what's known as pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is a state where just the observer is present. There are no feelings, emotions, sensations. It's just being in a state of pure consciousness. And it's by coming into contact with this state of pure consciousness over and over and over again that the observer recognizes its infinity, right? That the Atman is the same as the Brahman, for example, if you've studied Eastern traditions, or that, the macrocosm and the microcosm are the same, i.e. that you are God, right? God is in everything and everyone. It's omnipotent, it's omnipresent, right? But we don't recognize that in our day-to-day life. And so the veiling of the eyes is an important fundamental concept in mystical and magical practices, mainly because it turns the consciousness inward, right? So when you're beginning to perform magical ritual, however you do it, it's my suggestion that the first act that you do is to sit with eyes closed or stand with eyes closed and quiet the mind and allow yourself a few moments of meditation, or even to meditate for some time before engaging in the ritual work. So the eyes are closed now, and the next facet, which I find very, very interesting, is the application of the philosophical concept from the Kabbalah of the Zim Zum. So I recognize a lot of the concepts I cover in my podcast may not be well known to everyone. So I'll try to explain them the best I can, but I also would ask for you, if you hear something you don't understand, to go do your own research. But essentially the concept of Zimzum is this, that in order for the universe to be created, God had to withdraw itself to create a space for which creation could become manifest. And if you think about it, this is a little bit of a head trip, right? Well, how does God, who is omnipresent and in everything and everyone at all times, withdraw itself to create a space by which then creation can happen, right? A lot of people look at it like a vacuum concept, right? But if you pay attention to this part of the LBRP, right, it becomes easy to understand, right? You're sitting with your eyes closed, you're standing with your eyes closed, and you breathe in. And then you draw down light into yourself, right? Or energy into yourself, or the divine essence into yourself. What are you doing? Essentially, what you're doing is you're creating a concentrated singularity, energetically speaking. And you're concentrating this divine energy into one space. And what is a singularity? A singularity has a number of definitions, all which I think are applicable. One is when gravity becomes concentrated into one space and then becomes infinite. So it's a point in which gravity is infinite. And this is essentially what black holes are, right? Everything gets drawn into itself. and becomes infinite. It's also, mathematically speaking, it's when a function or an equation becomes undefined or infinite. For those of you who've studied maybe some math, this would be when x is divided by 0. Esoterically speaking, this is very interesting, right? When anything is divided by 0, by nothing, or by the totality, right, of everything, because that's also what 0 is, then it becomes a singularity, right? It becomes undefined, it becomes infinite. Another very interesting facet of the definition of singularity is when chaos and order collapse into a single point, meaning that they together become infinite, right? Of these opposing forces of chaos and order becoming infinite, right? So this singularity, right, is the drawing in into a concentrated space, right? God withdraws itself inward, right, to then create a space, right? What is this other space that's being created? Well, another infinity, okay? And you might be asking yourself, how can there be another infinity? Infinity is infinity, right? Just like God is omnipresent, infinity is infinity. One thing I want to point out is that the ancients were very good at math and created most of the math that we utilize today. And there wasn't just one infinity. There's not just one infinity. There's infinite infinities, right? And we think about things like the multiverse. We can understand this, but I'm gonna go ahead actually, and I'm just gonna get this graph out here, right? I'm gonna bring you back to middle school math, right? The XY axis here. Okay, so if we start here at the 0 point, at the singularity, and we move out this way indefinitely, right? What do we have? Infinity, right? It can go on and on and on for infinity. If we start back here and we go here on the graph, forever and ever, we have another infinity, right? We can do this at any point on the graph and have, like I said, infinite infinities, positive infinities, negative infinities, positive, negative infinities. Another thing I want to point out just as a side quest, because I love to do side quests, is notice how the graph here is on the XY axis, right? The Y being the yod, the masculine energy, as it descends and ascends into the manifest world, right? The feminine principle. And what you don't see on here is something called the Z-axis, right? The Z-axis is what projects forward and backwards. What's the Z-axis? It's the zygote, it's the child. It's the combination of the XY axis. So, I know a lot of people loathe math, but probably didn't get cool esoteric math in high school or middle school. So, I like to bring a little fun to the mathematics, and also just drive home the idea that, when we're talking about things like magical formula, it's not just, random things being put together, right? Formula is mathematical. Formula is mathematical, right? That's where we learn about formula first and foremost is in math. And then we see it applied to things like chemistry and other kinds of things, right? It's an equation. It works for a reason, because the elements that go together in the equation balance themselves out on their side, and it's demonstrable, right? If it's not demonstrable, then it's not true. Okay, and that's why magical formula is so important, and that's why I seek to teach it so that people can be empowered in their practices, because a lot of people just not understanding what is going on. They just make stuff up and then they change it and they don't realize the impact of it, you know, rendering it ineffective or sometimes potentially unsafe. Also, understanding and recognizing magical formula helps empower you in your work, right? So that you understand why you're doing it. And it also gives you power and leverage in recognizing it, you know, as it's presented in symbolism. If you're doing research or, you know, and also gives you some power and authority when someone's trying to BS you. Okay. Let's be honest. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. Okay. So, you know, it's important to understand what you're doing. Okay. So now that I went off on the little tirade here. Okay. So we have effectively now at this point, before we even ever started drawing any pentagrams or a circle or invoking archangels, what we've done thus far is we've created a singularity, a condensed point. We have replicated the fundamental act of preparation and creation by drawing energy into a concentrated singularity to create now another infinity. Okay, so we then are going to now move to the eastern quadrant, right, of where we'll start to create our circle. And this is also very interesting, mathematically speaking. So knowing, right, up front that eventually we're going to be creating a circle, right? If we think back to our trigonometry class in middle school or high school, right? When we have a circle and we draw a line from the center outward, what do we have? Well, we have the radius. What's the radius associated with? Pi. The number pi, which is a irrational number that goes on and on to infinity. Why is this important? Okay, we're applying the concept of sacred geometry here, of mathematics, which is the language of the universe, to our magical ritual practice, right? To recreate something in the space, to recognize that we're co-creators with the divine. Pi is a very important number, esoterically speaking, because it acts as the bridge between the infinite and the finite, right? The circle that will be drawn eventually is in and of itself a representation of the infinite. It is a shape that has no starting point or end point, and it has infinite points around it. This is a mathematical concept, okay? The circle itself represents infinity, right? The line that is drawn from that central singularity point to where the outside of the circle will be is measurable, right? A line is measurable. You can take a ruler and measure the length of that line, right? You can measure, we'll get to the idea of 360 degrees here in a little bit. But the line has finite points. The circle does not have finite points. However, the ratio that's created, pi, is also infinite. So it's a bridge, it's a mathematical bridge between the infinite and the finite, right? That has to be made, right? Even if you take a compass and drop the point down, and then you have to flay it out in order to draw the circle, well, you still have to make that line there, right? As above, so below. There's a lot of very interesting reflections in the material world, in the infinite world. So we walk now over to the eastern side, creating essentially the radius of the circle, bridging the gap between the infinite and the finite. And this is where we now begin to draw our pentagrams. So the pentagram, again, is highly mathematical. It recreates the the concept of phi, which is the golden ratio. So if you've ever seen images of Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man standing in a pentagram, then you may also have seen references to the golden ratio, right? When we consider things like nautilus shells, ratios that happen in the human body, in the trees. I mean, everywhere in nature, right? It's a ratio of perfection. That's why it's called the golden ratio. The golden ratio is inherent within the pentagram, right? And the pentagram is associated with the perfected man, or more, I'm going to say anthropon. Anthropon. We say man, right? Because generally speaking, whether we recognize it or not, our culture and our modern society has been heavily influenced by the King James Version of the Bible, where it says, "And the Elohim hath said," or God hath said, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and give him dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air," etc., right? That's where that idea of man comes from. But more accurately, if you look back at the Greek Septuagint, it's anthropon. Anthropon meaning archetypical man, humankind, male and female, right? That's actually what it's referring to. And that's what we mean here when we say perfected man. It's anthropon. It's the perfected archetypical human, right? So just in review, right, we have gone through the process of creation, and now we're projecting outwardly within the shape of the pentagram, the idea of the archetypical perfected man. Something that we, as a critical point of the LBRP is something we're seeking to recreate within ourselves, okay, is the perfected, to realize, okay, I shouldn't say create, to realize the perfection, the archetypical perfection that lies within us as a reflection of the divine. And also very interesting, not only is phi represented here, but pi is also represented here as well. Forgive me, because I'm going over such a technically heavy lecture, I did write some notes down for myself. So pi here in this sense reflects the symmetry of the pentagram within the circle, right? A lot of people think about where we're drawing 4 pentagrams. There's 4 pentagrams being created in the circle. No, there's 5. There's 5 pentagrams. The 4 that you draw, and the 5th, which you become at the end of the ritual. There's 5 pentagrams. And if you take 360 degrees and you divide that by 5, what do you get? 72 degrees. The 72-fold name of God, the 72 Shem HaEmfaresh, also the 72 generations between Adam and Christ, the number of years it takes for Earth to make a full precession. The Earth precesses 1 degree every year. So again, the magical formula is just, it's elegant, right? It's elegant. It's elegant. And not only what it does, but in what it helps us to understand in terms of our connection with the divine and how it works, right? We call it mysticism and magic, and because because it's not commonly understood, right? But it doesn't mean it can't be, right? So I hope that's one thing that I'm hoping to demonstrate in these videos is that if you take time to actually understand what's going on, it can give you an incredible amount of knowledge and understanding with respect to, your place here in the universe and what you can achieve and who you are, and how amazing that is. If there isn't anything more magical than recognizing how amazing you are in terms of the fact that you yourself are an expression, a facet of the divine, right? And the incredible things that can come from that. I don't know. To me, it's amazing. To me, it's just incredible. So, okay, moving on. Now we're going to go to the four corners. Okay, we're starting in the east, we go to the south, the west, and the north, right? Generally speaking, what happens here is an invocation of particular archangels related to the elements. And people tend to think about them mainly as, elemental forces, archetypical elemental forces invoked through the powers of the archangels. And this is accurate, but there's more to it. There's more to it. Another thing that's happening here is the invocation of the four winds. This is something that comes from ancient Greek practices and Egyptian practices as well. If you didn't know, the two cultures are very intimately connected, as well as Eastern practices. It's a fundamental universal formula to invoke the four winds. And the reason for that is because the four winds were considered mediators between the divine and the human world. Okay, again, this is very explicit with respect to how this ritual seeks to apply a formula. I shouldn't say seeks, how it does. How this ritual applies formula specifically to link the finite or the infinite to the finite, right? Is through this invocation of the four winds, the invocation of the elements, which establishes then, right, these infinite energies into a more material frame of reference here. And another thing I'll note is, as we draw the circle, later we come back in to invoke these archangels, right? And what happens is we square the circle. Okay, that's what's happening in this particular act, right, of invoking those archangels after we've completed the circle. So we have drawn the four pentagrams around. Okay, re-entered the circle in the middle now, coming back through the radius, right? This is interesting. We start in the east and we go around and we come back to the middle. Oh, another thing very quickly. I've seen this published before, but another thing that's happening, right, is we're going to the east, sunrise, the south, high noon, west, sunset, north, nighttime, right? We're also invoking the powers of the sun throughout the day as well, right? Reflecting the higher celestial solar light into the finite material, through that invocation of the patterning of the day as well. Okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm going off on tangents here, but I believe everyone's keeping up, and you can always pause it if I get a little too ADD on you. Okay, so now we're back. Now we're back in the circle. We've traversed back up the radius into the center, right? So what happened here? We enacted ourselves as God, went to create perfection throughout the world, and now we're coming back to the center, right? To become now the perfected man. And what happens? We extend our arms and legs out in the form of the pentagram. This is the fifth pentagram, the fifth pentagram. And this is when we perform the invocation of the archangels, which allows us to square the circle and make that final connection between the infinite and the finite, right? We visualize the archangels in the four quarters and the four quadrants as we say their particular invocations, and that then creates the square as the energy gets connected between them. And then, and this is always an interesting point of reflection because it's highly debated. Highly debated. Before me flames the pentagram, behind me shines a six-rayed star. Or above me flames the pentagram, within me shines a six-rayed star. Or around me, right? This is where people love to switch it up, right? And so I'll just say this. I'll only give my personal opinion on which one I think is most accurate. And I will just say up front that it's my personal opinion, and I am in no way putting down anyone else's practice, however they may choose to do it. It's not fundamentally dangerous, and it doesn't ruin anything, right? And I've explored this concept quite a bit over the years. So if people want to do it differently, I'm not going to deride people and tell you, oh my God, all of a sudden you're invoking a demon or anything like that. But I will give my my argument for why I personally think it's before me flames the pentagram and behind me shines the six-rayed star. My argument is this: you just spent, your entire time drawing pentagrams all around the circle as a reflection of the anthropon, right? Building each part of that pentagram all around you. Why? Because you want the reflection of the perfected man. So when you want something to reflect back on you, what do? You put it in front of you, right? You look in a mirror and it gets reflected back to you. It's a mirrored image here. In my opinion, that is the more accurate application of the formula. And behind me shines the six-rayed star. Why? Because it makes up the six-rayed star is the macrocosmic energy that makes up the underlying substrate, right? And what else is reflective of the underlying substrate of existence? It's our subconscious. And where's the subconscious represented in the human body? In the back of the neck, the Koph area, if you've studied Kabbalah, right? This is why in some high magic traditions, people wear a nemes. They wear a nemes with the tail down the back, like they did in ancient Egypt, because the tail protects the Koph center, right? It protects that area of where the brain stem is, right? And the brain stem is the part of the human brain that is associated with root consciousness, right? Like you can pretty much have brain damage to any other part of your brain, but once something happens to the brain stem, that's pretty much it, right? That's absolutely required. And so it's you know, it is the part of the brain that connects, that acts essentially as the cable, right, between the conscious and the subconscious. Whereas the rest of the brain, the limbic system, is, the part that functions mostly throughout the day to maintain homeostasis and to make things easier for us. And then this tiny little part up here is our analytical frontal lobe. A lot of people would be surprised to discover how small that part of our brain is. Okay, so I'm gonna just take a second here to consider if I forgot anything else critical related to this ritual. Oh, that's right. I did say I was going to circle it back around now to the more commonly understood facet of the LBRP, which is its utilization for balancing out the individual internally speaking, and also creating a magical circle in which the energy within it is neutralized, so it can prepare, the space can be prepared for other ritual magic, right? If you were going to invoke an archangel or do some scrying, etc., right? It is called the banishing ritual, the pentagram. I personally don't think that's the best descriptive, because it leads people to believe that you just like exercised something out of the space, right? It really, what it does is it neutralizes energy. If you think about, let's say you walked into work and they had just had like a work party and everybody was leaving, right? But you came in a little bit late. How that space feels, right? It feels a lot different than when you're there during the day for work. There's impressions that are made on our environment, right? So this happens, in every environment. And that's where the LBRP comes in, as it neutralizes that space so that other ritual works that are performed can be done so in an equilibrated fashion, as well as it makes that space comfortable if you're going to commune with other entities like, archangels or something like that, right? You don't want to have a space that has been full of like a water energy when you're going to invoke, a fire entity or something, right? You want it to be a comfortable space for your friend. And I emphasize that, right? I'm going to go on a little side quest here. People talk about commanding forces, okay? What does a commander do, right? A commander ensures that their people, right, are clear, that they're understood on the pathway, that they can work together, that they will effectively achieve the goal. And if you think about leadership, right, I think it was Machiavelli in The Prince, he said a leader or king can be, either loved or feared, right? And there, time and time again, historically speaking, being loved is the far better pathway to get loyalty, right? And so the reason I bring this up is a lot of people just treat these entities like they're servants, like they're here to serve you, right? Go do my bidding. As it is desired, so shall it be. They have this very egotistical mind frame about it. And sure, yeah, sure, you can command forces through fear. You can do that. You're going to get better results. However, if you formulate a relationship with the entities that you're working with, right? They're conscious beings, okay? Let's be clear, they're conscious beings. They're not figments of your imagination. They're not something that just made up. If you believe that, it's probably why your magic isn't working, okay? There are worlds, right? We talked about infinities, infinite infinities. There are far more other worlds that exist between this than this one here. And we're so blessed that our neighbors in another world would come over when we knock on the door with our keys, right? That's what we have. That's what the formula is. The formulas that we have to invoke these entities, they're keys. Essentially, hey, you got the key to come into my house and say, what's up, right? How would you like it if you gave a key to someone that came in your house and they're like, go and do my dishes? Let's not do that. So now that I'm circling it back around again, how does this reflection of infinity result in a neutralized space? It's because what you have done essentially in the end is you have recreated the fundamental aspects of what underlies all of reality, right? And you have not only done that, but then you've recreated the perfected anthropon as well, right? What is perfection? Perfection is equilibrium. Perfection is the synthesis of all energies, right? That's another reason why I don't think the term banishing is the most appropriate. Again, this is just my opinion, is because the word, it makes it seem like you just booted out stuff. No, what you did is you balanced everything in perfect equilibrium through the infinite. By drawing the infinite down and recognizing your infinity, you have equilibrated yourself, because you now have become essentially the potential energy from which then you can act from and generate that into kinetic energy. And if you think about it, philosophically speaking, as well as, with respect to physics and even mathematics, the most neutral point is the point of equilibrium, right? When we think about meditation traditions, they always talk about how when you're in that state of pure consciousness, it's a totally equilibrated state. That's why you don't have feelings and emotions and sensations, because the field of consciousness is settled down to its pure state. There's no ripples in the field of consciousness. It's totally neutral. And it's the same thing in math and science, right? When you balance the equation, it's neutral. When you consider physics, right? All neutral points are the ones that are equilibrated, right? We were talking about singularities earlier, right? Let's link that back. How when chaos and order come together, right? They become infinity. So I hope that this podcast was meaningful for you. I think, for all the people who follow me on Facebook, and that I chat with, you all know I'm just incredibly passionate about magic and mysticism, and helping to show people that it's effective and why it's effective, right? I really just, I don't want people to live in a world where they're playing games, with themselves, or they're making stuff up in their mind and then asking themselves why it doesn't work, right? When you are trying to transform yourself on a personal level or on a spiritual level, or you are involved in the great work, being able to understand why you do what you do is incredibly important. And it brings a lot of passion and power to your work as well. Never forget, it's sulfur, the passion the blood that connects mercury to the salt. It's the bridge, it's the gap. When you lack passion in your heart for what you do, it's very difficult to continue on. So I think that understanding why something works, so when you are standing even with eyes closed, ready to begin, just even your banishing ritual, the preparatory ritual for which other rituals will subsequently come, recognizing that what you're doing is recreating your consciousness, transforming your consciousness to recognize its infinite potential, so that then when you go into your other ritual, right, that's the space that you're in, the space of being a co-creator, the space of recognizing that the reason you can perform that ritual and it will be effective is because you are an infinite expression of the infinite divine. Okay, I love you all. I'll see you next time. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.